Hello, welcome back to another episode of Coach Krisler's Combos. Today, I am joined by Dr. Efrat Lamondre. And so thank you so much for being here with me today. I know that you are busy. You do a lot of really great things. And so I appreciate your time. And for those of you who are not familiar with you, let them know who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Okay, that sounds great. First of all, thank you all for being here and for listening. We're trying to make this as interesting as possible. As you're, maybe washing your dishes or mowing your lawn. That's what my listeners say. I have one listener that says that every time I mow my lawn, I listen to your podcast. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So my name is Efrat Lamondre. Everyone calls me E. And I'm a nurse practitioner with a PhD in integrative medicine. When I first started my first practice called EG Healthcare, it is a primary care practice. Just kind of think of your primary care doctor's office. And things were going great. It was awesome. And a lot of my patients would come in and say, hey, I really don't feel well. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me run all the labs on you. And they would come out fine. And I would say, you're fine. I'll see you next year. And they're like, but I don't feel fine. I'm like, well, you're fine. So I don't know what to tell you. Insert like eye roll here. Like I can't help you out. And I never really realized at all that that was disempowering. I just assumed I was doing the right thing because I was using the tools that I learned in NP school and conventional medicine. And this is really important. Your doctors who are telling you they're fine, you're fine. They don't mean you any harm. That's the tools we have. According to the tools we have, you're fine. Then my wife got sick, and we could explore that more later. But my wife got sick. In conventional medicine, we clearly, for the first time ever, understood the limitations of conventional medicine. And we had to start thinking outside the box for our personal journey. And that led us to functional medicine. And that was the only thing that helped us. And then I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should bring this back to my practice. And over time, I developed a new method, and new is spelled with a K, because my patients always know. You always knew there's a better way. And like we knew there had to be a different answer for her issues than what we learned in the books. She's also in conventional medicine. So I developed a new method. And now when my patients come in and say, hey, I don't feel good, and the labs are fine, I'm like, oh, okay, now we can start talking.
Yeah. I love that. I love good wordplay, by the way. I love the new method with the K. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
And, I've had several doctors on, several medical professionals, from nurse practitioners, MDs, DOs, and many of them have the same story as you. They've gone through the classic training. They are, kind of following the protocol, the standard, of care that we follow here in the US. And it's not really doing their patients very much good. It becomes this revolving door where they see them over and over and over again, and not much is really getting better. So with this personal experience that you've had with your wife, that really seems to have been a big eye-opening moment for you. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I first just want to address one of the sentences you said, which is that conventional medicine is not doing anyone really much good. And I know you didn't quite mean it that way, but for some people they mean that, and that's not necessarily true, right? And I know you didn't mean this, but I just want to clarify: conventional medicine is critical for your health.
Mm-hmm.
If there are certain diseases, I would want to be nowhere else besides in conventional medicine in this country
For
for
sure.
certain diseases. But outside of those diseases, if you don't fit in that algorithm, that's when it doesn't do you any good. So my wife had 2 autoimmune issues. The first one was called PMLE, which is polymorphous light eruption, which basically means she had an allergy to the sun. And when I met her, we just accommodated. And many of your listeners will feel the same way, like the first diagnosis or the first aches and pains. You're resilient, so you just kind of get through it. And we just knew when we can go out, when we couldn't. We never really sought treatment for it because we accommodated. But the second autoimmune for her was psoriasis, but it was so severe that like she couldn't walk because her feet would
Mhm.
bleed and she couldn't button her clothes because her fingers would bleed. And that's what prompted us. And usually people will have something else that'll be like, when they finally hit the wall is when they start asking questions. And the
Mhm.
only thing that was offered to us was really heavy duty medications, which would manage the flare ups temporarily. But there was never the question of, well, why is this happening? Why?
Mhm.
Not because people didn't want to ask it, because that's not the tools in conventional medicine is not why. So we started exploring this, and what we discovered with functional medicine, again, when we went to this guy, this is a little bit before the internet was what it is today. So we didn't really have a way to vet this or ask. It was like word of mouth. We went to this guy and he told us we have to change our nutrition, which is insane because what does nutrition have to do with health? Right.
Mhm.
And and not only did it make no sense to us because we never learned that autoimmunity has to do with food, we thought we were relatively healthy. I mean, to look at
Mhm.
us, we were both thin, not that thin means health, but I'm just drawing a picture. We were both thin, athletic. We thought we did everything right. So like, how dare you suggest that our diseases have anything to do with what we eat?
Mhm.
So we just listened to him. We're like, whatever, we have nothing to lose. It's not going to work anyway, but we'll just do what he says. We did these crazy blood tests and he told us to eat this crazy food. And we're like, whatever. And it worked. Like it worked. Like we were fortunate enough to be able to she had a disease that we could visually see receding.
Mhm.
Like we would just take pictures of the rash and be like, what is happening? It felt like magic.
Yeah.
And then, once you go down the rabbit hole, that's it. You're not coming out. And then it's one course and then another course and then another course. And before you know it,
Yeah.
you have your own situation going.
Yeah.
That's what brought us here.
Wow.
And I'm sure you know that almost everyone in functional medicine has either been sick themselves or someone that they love has been sick. That's how we get here, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. There's so many things in there. I'm like, I want to ask all these questions now. And thank you for clarifying what I had said earlier. Definitely did not mean that we don't need conventional medicine doctors, because we certainly do. Recently, I was in the ER with my husband, and for sure,
Yes.
100%, it was, the best experience because we had some great doctors. So I'm curious about how you even came across the functional medicine practitioner that you saw. Was it was just someone told you about this person, or how did you find out?
Yeah. I was working as a nurse practitioner in a pain management clinic. And next door was a chiropractor. And I was just telling about my wife. And he goes, you should see this guy. And I was like, okay. But really we were at wit's end. Like we at that point, you could have told us to like lick the wall. We would be like, okay, right. And that most of your patients come
Yeah.
to you and they're like, just tell me what to do. Jump on my head like 400 times. I'll do it. Let's give me the answer. So
Mhm.
it was kind of like, fine, let's just go see him. Let's just like, we have nothing to lose.
Mhm.
And as you know, in functional medicine, nothing that we suggest to you has a bad side effect. Like if we tell you eat broccoli, like there's no side effect to it, right?
Yeah.
So like in functional medicine, when we say to you, hey, try this nutritional approach, let's do these lifestyle modification approach, there's kind of no downside to it. So you're like, okay, let me try it. It's not like I'm saying, hey, try this, experimental drug. I'm not really sure. It's like, right. So we went to it thinking it's not going to work, but it's not going to harm us. So why not try it?
Right.
And it
Right.
freaking worked.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've heard of people having psoriasis, but I have not heard of it being that severe. So obviously, by that point, I can imagine just how difficult everyday life would have been for her to experience just daily pain and the bleeding of the feet and all of that. Um, what was kind of the first thing that you guys started trying just to implement and change?
So with her, it was really basic. I say like if I have patients like this now, I'm excited. So it's super easy. My patients tend to be more complex, but um, it was really just an elimination diet. He had us
Mhm.
remove everything gluten, dairy, legumes. At the time, he put us on AIP protocol, autoimmune protocol. So like the strictest of the strict.
Right.
And it worked with it. Within days, we saw remission, and within a few months we had a full remission.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was life-changing.
It's crazy how simple sometimes the the solution can be. Now, obviously, we have to change our habits and go through our daily and really look at what we're doing, what we're eating, and start reading labels. It can be very overwhelming, but really there are some very simple things that can be done in order to change things up. And so, did you find that there were challenges that you had in this and in the either with the elimination diet or some of the other things that you changed?
For us, like as patients at the time,
Yes.
yeah, it's so hard. Who doesn't want to eat pizza?
Right.
It's so hard. Elimination diets are so hard, and when I work with my patients, like I recognize how hard it is. I mean, I still live very clean now. It's hard. There's food around you all the time, but you like anything else, it's kind of like money. Like you want to spend all your money, you don't want to save. It's hard to save, right? But the things that are worthwhile are hard to do. And you have to make the decision, what's harder, having your disease or not eating the pizza? And it's a personal decision. And I have plenty of patients, because I still have a primary care practice. I have plenty of patients who would rather take the medicine, and that's fine too. But we just have to have a conversation about it. I'll say, hey, you're on 6 medications. You don't need to be on these medications if you change your lifestyle. I say, no, I really like to eat what I eat. And I'm like, cool, then come back every 3 months and we'll make sure I have the right dosage. And that's treatment also. And for those people, they would rather be on 5 medication than to walk away from certain foods for whatever reason. Maybe it's not the right time, their social life, whatever. And that's okay too, because it is really hard to go down this road. It's not easy. There's food everywhere.
Yeah.
So it has to be clear. The patients who come to me tend to be really sick, like the way my wife was, where it's like the alternative is so much worse. And so then in those moments, you're like, do I really want the pizza? You're like, well, sure. Do I want my feet to bleed? Nope, you can keep the pizza. But you kind of have to have that in your mind to be like, to help you through the hard times.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in looking at, you mentioned being very thin. We have this kind of expectation, at least in our culture, that if you are of a certain size, then that equals health. What do you see? Do you find that is something that you see with your patients as well? Like when they come to you and they're like, "Well, I'm not overweight," really, is that big of a deal, right? I'm probably pretty healthy because I'm thin. So, what do you find with your patients in that?
Some of my sickest patients are also my thinnest patients. That's what I find. So, okay, so let's kind of separate this into two. Is there a conversation around obesity that certainly leads you to higher risk for certain, mortality? You're more likely to die from certain things if you are in the obese category? Yes. Okay, let's put that on the side for a moment. But now when we talk about health and feeling well, I have patients who, as soon as we start initiating certain changes, are feeling amazing and their symptoms are subsiding, even though they've hardly lost weight. Right? So you're coming in, maybe you're in the obese category, overweight category. We're a month or two in. How much weight did you lose a month or two in? 5 pounds, 10 pounds? Not that much for some people, but you're already half of your symptoms are gone. So you could feel amazing, even though you didn't lose the weight, whatever your goal weight is. When I tell my patients who are heavy, I said, listen, this is not a weight loss program. You will lose weight, but it's a side effect. What we're trying to do is lose symptoms. If we lose the symptoms and we're going to get there nutritionally, oh yeah, by the way, I never have a goal weight for them. If you have a goal weight, I'll help you achieve it. But I have goal symptoms. I want you to be like as close to 0 symptoms as possible. Conversely, I have very, very thin, primarily women, who are really, really unwell. Their bellies are a mess, not because they're thin, but I'm just saying it just happens to be that
Mhm.
some of my sickest patients are, it's not a weight issue. So, and it's actually a struggle because they tend to already have cleaned up their diet. They've already cleaned up their nutrition. And so it's not as simple as just fixing their nutrition. Sometimes you have to go dig deeper. Is there a Lyme? Is there a mold? Is there something else happening in their world that we have to address that has absolutely nothing to do with weight? So it's, so I'm not discrediting, of course, the connection of certain diseases and issues that come with obesity, but it's really not necessarily true that your weight is how you feel.
Mhm.
And conversely, the women who come in who are overweight or struggling with weight and they're not feeling well, and their providers are saying, well, if you just lost some weight, you'd feel great. That's not true either, because their issue is not weight to begin with.
Mm.
And some of these women felt horribly before they gained the weight. And they're like,
Right.
yeah, 20 pounds ago, I still felt this way, my man. And 20 pounds later, and I recently signed on a patient and she said, last year I went on Weight Watchers, no discredit to Weight Watchers, but you can go on Weight Watchers, lose weight and eat brownies all day. Like as
Mhm.
long as you have 24 points of brownies, you'll get to your weight loss, but you will still feel unwell.
Mhm.
So yeah, weight is not, it's not the be all end all in any way, shape or
Yeah.
size. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have always been thin. This has been my structure almost my whole life. And there have been many years that I felt unwell. I was exhausted, and there were so many times where it was, well, you're working, you're a busy mom, those types of things were said. And yes, of course, short term, like when my kids are newborns, I'm going to be tired, but
Sure.
it should not be for years at a time, or maybe even months at a time, where you're just exhausted and struggling. And so, you know, um, it's really unfortunate that, women I experienced this where I was just like, well, I'm just tired, I'll sleep when my kid is 5. Like, no, 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 no. You can, make improvements to feel better now. So that's one thing I really love about, there's so many things, but that's one thing I love about functional medicine is um, functional medicine practitioners are the bloodhounds of medicine. Like when they see that something's not working, they're like, okay, but that's not working. Let's look for something else. Let's keep digging. Let's plow
Mhm.
through. So it's a really cool thing that, when people are experiencing improvements, they're getting supported in that. And if they aren't, it's like, let's look for something else. Let's keep asking the questions. And I would say one really cool question is, when was the last time you felt well?
Yeah,
That's a powerful question.
it is a powerful question. But and I want to address that, but you've said so many things. What you said also is that there are so many different ways to tell a woman that it's in her head. And
Mm,
so it's in your head is another way of saying it is your weight. It's your
mm,
hormones. You're a mom, what do you expect? You're 50, what do you expect? You're a career woman, what do you expect? So it's basically every way saying none of what you're feeling is real. It's all secondary to, so like at what point do we get taken seriously? So if it's when we have hormones, it's because we're hormonal. And when we don't have hormones, postmenopause, it's because we don't have hormones. And once we have kids, because we're moms, if we're career women, we're busy. But like, at what point do our symptoms are just our symptoms?
mhm,
Like, that's just life. Like, that's just life, raising my kids or having a job. Like, that's life. I should be able to function in life without the brain fog and the joint pain and
mhm,
the insomnia, right? What does that have to do with that? And while I certainly also treat men, I don't think that men, if get the same responses in the medical
mhm,
practice. In fact, I know. And then, I mean, statistics speak for themselves. And then on top of that, if you're a minority woman, forget it. So that's extra. Let's just add that later on. And it's all a variation of it's in your head. maybe you're depressed. Maybe we should give you some Lexapro. Maybe we should give you some Zoloft. Not that there's anything wrong with those meds, but is that really where we're going to start? Right? That should be, I prescribe it too. I'm not against it, but is that where we're going to end it? So just know, if you're a woman listening to this and that's what you're being told, yes, it's true. You're tired. You're not sleeping. You have a newborn, or you have a career, or you're in school. All true. But how come you were able to do it 2 years ago? How come it was fine 4 years ago? In fact, I just signed on someone who, again, in her 60s, and she's like, I think it's all because I'm so busy. I was like, that's interesting, because you just told me you retired, which means to me that you were definitely busier 10 years ago as you carried all your career and your children. And now you're not. She's currently working on her PhD, but she's not working. So how busy are you that you think that it's because you're busy? And she's like, oh my God, I guess you're right. I'm like, because it's not related. It's not related. If we're busy, maybe we might fall more towards not as good habits, because we might not, go for nutrition. That is true, but that's not the reason you're not feeling well. As to your point as to when did you last feel well, it's really important, because what that tells you in that question is just the trigger. Okay. Now, for some people, they think the trigger is the cause. It's not the same thing. So I'll tell you what I mean. People will say, ever since COVID, I don't feel right. Ever since my divorce, ever since the birth of my child, ever since I moved, ever since I lost my job. Sometimes it's happy things, ever since my son graduated. And those are the triggers, but they're not the cause. Even when it comes to COVID, what do you mean? How could you compare COVID to it? So that is the thing that pushed you over the edge. But you were cooking this thing way before. You just didn't know it, or you didn't pay attention to it. Maybe your knees hurt every once in a while. Maybe you have brain fog every once in a while. Didn't pay attention to it. You're busy. You were getting stuff done. You didn't pay attention to it. You were good. You were high functioning. Then you had an event, and that event threw you over. That is the trigger. Because I cannot go back and remove COVID. I cannot go back and get you undivorced. I cannot go back and get you unmoved. But I can unearth what happened, what was going on before the trigger, what was happening before that led us to this like horrible cascade. So it's a great thing, but then you have to take the patients out of that focus. Sometimes they're so focused on that event that it actually works against them.
Yeah, that makes me think about the functional medicine timeline and looking at a person's entire life, and seeing, what things were like for them as a child, what their experiences were like, what their medication intake was like, what their schooling was like, all of what their environment was like, all of these different things, and kind of looking at an entire life, a number of years and a number of things that may have been filling their bucket. It's like, this little thing happened, this happened, you took antibiotics, you had a stressful moment, your parents got divorced, you started college, all of these things were filling your bucket. And then there's that trigger that made your bucket overflow, and your body couldn't handle it anymore. It's like, girl, we're done. We need to do something about this.
Correct. That's exactly right. So my patients will come in, and I spend my first moment with my patients is an hour, because this can't be done in 5 minutes. And I let them first kind of like just talk. And inevitably they talk like really, really, really fast, because they're so used to they're under the gun. And then and I'm like, okay, just FYI, like, we're not in a rush. Okay. So they get it done, they tell their whole story, and then like take a deep breath, and then like, anything else? No, I'm done. I'll tell you my whole story. Great. Now let's go back to when you were born. And then we start over, right? We start from the beginning, and then they start seeing the threads that they never even saw. And that's the magical moment of the consultation. I absolutely love that piece. That's my favorite moment.
Do you find that in those moments too, they kind of like their shoulders drop and they kind of relax and they start talking a little bit more and giving you more detail?
Yeah. And then also, and the moment at the end when they're done, and I kind of retell the story and put it together for them, there's often tears, where there's like, either because they're just for the first time being heard, and
Mm.
all of them has been taken into account, or for the first time, they're not told that they're crazy, and like, just hope, right? Because sometimes when you understand where it's all coming from, there's hope, or at least a plan of the next step. People always say, I can handle anything if I know what to do next. So sometimes just knowing like, okay, I could do this, this, and this. All right. That's good, right? It's empowering. So yeah, there's so much emotion in that first consultation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm thinking about too, when you're talking about the emotional part of it, um, how much would you say, or maybe speak on, when someone is discussing their background, their history, they're talking about what's going on, thinking about stress and their mental health and their emotions, how much of that do you discuss with them, or do you feel is a part of what's going on?
I mean, it certainly depends on the patient. For some people, it's everything. And for some people, that part of their life is really okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends, right? Some people will be like, everything is great. I don't know why I feel this way. My relationship with my husband is great. And, I have a great support system, and yet blah, 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 blah. And for some people, it's exactly opposite. So part of it is knowing that it's right. It's not a one size fits all. Each person is going to present differently, and recognizing that even though there's like, different pieces, for some people, you might need to focus on one particular piece instead of the other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a very personalized approach.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so there's like I would say start my patients on a common kind of jumping board, but then just because we need a starting point. So I start
Mm-hmm.
everyone more or less at the same starting point, but then where we go is
Mm-hmm.
completely, I have no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, you definitely kind of have a general idea of what you're going to ask. The intake form maybe is the same questions that
Hmm.
everybody gets. But once you get going on that intake form and you start asking and digging and hearing the responses, then you start putting things together and maybe taking a different route depending on what that person's needs seem to be or how they're responding.
Yeah. And the treatment also, like I'll start everyone more or less with the same nutritional suggestions.
Hmm.
But then where we go after that completely depends on how their body responds, how they can handle it.
Hmm.
And I have no idea. Sometimes it's as easy as changing their nutrition. I'm like, great, I'm a genius.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they're like, hey, I've been doing this for 6 weeks, nothing has changed. And you're like, great, it's not nutrition. What's next?
Hmm.
Right. So it's so patient dependent. And as long as the patient as shows up and is methodical and
Hmm.
understands that this is a journey and it's not a quick fix, there's no magic protocol. There's no, this is what we do at 30 days, this is what we do at 60 days. There's none of that. If they understand that, then it's awesome. It's a great relationship.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I do think setting those expectations is really important. I've heard, doctors mention that they sort of interview people in the sense that they really want to have a conversation with them to let them know this is a process, it's a journey. There's not going to be this instantaneous, thing that happens. There's no one pill or one thing that they can take or do that's going to automatically change whatever's going on. Sometimes that does happen for people, but sometimes it does take, several weeks, several months for them to really see those improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone's different, but again, it has to be for the right patient.
Mm,
It's not for everyone. If you want a quick fix, then it's not for you. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not for you. This is a
mhm,
slow and steady process. This is for really long lasting change by getting to the root cause, changing the root cause, and watching it go from there. And it's layers.
mhm. Yeah. Do you find that your patients, because you've mentioned that the patients that come to you typically are in more serious health states, that their conditions are really kind of their back is against the wall. So do you find that your patients are more compliant in the sense that when you're starting them on this process, that they really stick to it? Or do you find that there's kind of some wavering or pushback?
I think where I am now, I don't attract the patient who's wavering. And by that, I mean, when I was first starting, the criteria to be my patient was pretty much like show up. And so, not everyone who's committed is showing up, because something like,
Mm,
oh, it's like just, it was different. It was less of a screening process.
mm,
But now, um, because I've become more well known, you have to already kind of know you're committed, right? You have to pay for the consultation. And that in and of itself already is like, well, am I willing to put my resources to it? Right? Am I willing to, or am I just showing up just to like see
mhm,
what's going on? And if I'm not really willing to put my resources to it, so for someone to do that and be willing to put their resource for the consultation fee, that means that they've already watched my videos and they saw my TikTok and they saw my Instagram, and they've already started vetting me. They already started hearing about me, because for
mhm,
them to make that deposit down, they're like, well, who is this lady? Right. So they've done their homework by the time they've made the appointment. So now they've made the appointment, they've put their resources. So by the time they get to meet me, they've already been through so much of my content.
mhm,
So they're already halfway there. And now the console kind of puts it all together for them. And there's no pressure. We do not pressure sales at all. After that, it's like, hey, if you want to work with us, great. And if you don't, I hope you got empowered by this console, because in and of itself, it should have been a great experience for you. And to
mhm,
those people who are like, no, I'm 100%, I've been waiting to work with you. Like, the compliance is already there. They've already kind of done the work in advance. And for those who are like, no, I'm good, I'll think about it. Awesome. Keep consuming my content, because there's so much information there too. So the way the system is set up right now really draws to me the people who have been down this vortex. They've already been listening to a lot of people. Maybe they've already tried some changes. They're there already. So compliance
mhm,
tends to be less of an issue at this point.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's awesome because once they get started and they're laser focused, it's really a beautiful thing to see them work and see them put in the effort and the time and make the changes, and those improvements then come. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's, when I talk to clients that are, doing even the smallest thing, and they are like, I feel so much better. Like I can think, throughout my day, or I'm not falling asleep at 2 o'clock, or,
Hmm.
I'm not yelling at my kids, as much as I used to, or whatever it is, it's like the light bulb comes on and they are so excited. And that gets me excited. And I'm sure you're the same way. You're like, yes, let's keep going. Let's keep pushing through.
Oh my God, yeah. It's the best feeling in the world when people tell you how it impacts their life. Like, I could bend down when my wallet falls down on the floor. I could bend down and pick it up. Sometimes it's that simple.
Mhm.
When people say that they remember the moment the brain fog lifts,
Mm,
that's powerful. That's so powerful. Or their skin is better. They're not embarrassed to wear black t-shirts because of psoriasis and their scalp is gone. Like, they're small things, but like they're life
mhm,
changing for people. um, Fertility issues for some of my patients,
mm.
endometriosis being gone, painful periods being gone. Like, these are things that are debilitating. Um, and we just accept it like, oh, this must be just how I have to live my life. Relationships between partners, because you're not as exhausted anymore. Like, we can't sometimes appreciate how much being exhausted, how many you know, parts of life it is. It's not just about getting
Mhm.
to work. It's, well, now you have nothing left for your kids. You have nothing left for your partner. So it's just, it touches every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
So it's a powerful moment.
Yeah. You know, one of the coolest things I hear people say is, I had no idea I could feel this good.
Hmm.
I mean, that statement is so powerful. And it's sad in a sense that they've gone for so long feeling so bad and just
Yes.
not knowing that they could feel better. But when
Yes.
they hit that moment and they realize that they can feel better, and it's not just being a career mom, or, it's not just the move or whatever it is, like there were a lot of things going on. Man, that's a huge statement.
Yeah. And the reason people don't realize they could feel this way, I think, is because the change happens slowly. Like even if there's
Mm,
a trigger, it gets slowly over time
mhm,
worse. And then if you're of a certain age, I would say 45 plus, everyone around you is not feeling well. And so you start thinking, this is normal.
mhm,
This is normal because, Bob says his knees hurt, and Jill says she has brain fog, and this one says they can't remember phone numbers anymore. And so feeling unwell is normalized. And so why would you think anything is possible? You're not the odd man out. If everyone's
mhm,
feeling great and you're the one dragging, you're like, oh, this is not normal. But everyone's dragging. And everyone tells you, oh, this is what it is over 40. This is what it is over 50. This is how it is when you get old. And so you believe that feeling unwell is normal. Of course, you're going to
mhm.
gain weight. Everybody over the 60s is a little bit overweight. No, we've normalized being unwell. And
Right.
so it's really hard to imagine not being unwell because everyone's unwell. And it's because everyone's eating the standard American diet and everyone's doing those things. And it didn't affect them when they were 30, or so they thought. And then before you know it, they're 50 or 60 and like everything's falling apart. And then when you show them, hey, it's have to be this way, it is really, it's earth shattering. It really is.
Mhm. Yeah. So something else regarding normal, and this is kind of take us back a little bit, but you mentioned blood work. Somebody would come to you, you would draw their blood, do their labs and everything would come back normal. Um, can you speak a little bit to that in terms of what that really means in the medical community, and how, even if somebody's labs maybe look normal, why you would, go further, maybe look at something different, or, something like that.
Okay. The bottom line is all that matters is how you feel.
Mm,
Okay. You don't feel good. You're tired. Your joints hurt. You have brain fog. Your periods are irregular. Your skin's weird. You don't feel good. That's all that matters. So now, when you go to conventional medicine, their job is to find a medical diagnosis.
mhm,
So, for example, I'm tired. Okay, let me check if you're anemic or if you have a thyroid issue. No, you're not anemic. Your thyroid's fine. You are good. There is no medical reason for your tiredness.
mhm,
So you're expelled from conventional medicine because there's no medical reason for your tiredness, but you're still tired. But if you keep going back to your medical provider, they've done the work that they can do to figure out your tiredness.
mhm,
Conversation is over. You can't keep going back. You can't keep going to the plumber and saying, please fix my light bulb. You can't. Your plumbing's fine. Okay. So if your symptoms are still there, you're still tired, and there's no medical reason, then you are either have a different diagnosis or you're what I call a pre-medical condition. So right? So we know there's diabetes and there's pre-diabetes. So if I'm diabetic today, I've been pre-diabetic for 10 years. We
mhm,
happen to have a test for pre-diabetes, we could do that. But with autoimmunity, for example, if I test my blood work today and there are no autoimmune markers, if I tell you that every single morning I wake up stiff, it takes me all day not to get stiff, that sounds like rheumatoid arthritis. But then
mhm,
I go check my RF factor and it's negative. All that means is I'm on my way. It's just my blood doesn't show it yet. It's what we
mhm,
call seronegative, meaning your serum is negative. You're seronegative autoimmune. So you look like a rheumatoid arthritis, but your blood work doesn't do it. So in the conventional medicine, the blood work is negative. There's nothing we could do for you. We're not, there's nothing, right? But in this world, you're like, okay, but I'm still aching in the morning. So we're like, okay, well, what's causing the inflammation that's causing the achiness, even though you have yet to be diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis? It doesn't matter to me because once you're diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, I'm still just managing your symptoms, which is
mhm,
the stiff joints. So, oh, you have leaky gut. Oh, you eat gluten, for example. Great. Well, let's see what that feels like without the gluten. Wow. Ever since I moved gluten, I'm not stiff in the morning. Great. right? So who cares if the blood work's positive or negative?
Right.
Okay. But that being said, you never skip the blood work. You must always go. I will never take a patient that has not been through the conventional medicine like loop first, because you cannot say I'm fatigued, I must have adrenal fatigue, and have never got tested for like anemia or thyroid. Absolutely not. Go to all the primary care, go to all their specialists, get every single blood work, every single scan that you want to do. When that's negative, then you know it's time for functional medicine. Or if you have a diagnosis already and you want a different approach to it, but never skip that step. So it could be normal and you're not feeling well. So listen to your symptoms, but always start there.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you so much for going into so much detail, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, I keep hearing my blood work is normal, but I feel horrible. My skin looks terrible, or I keep breaking out in these rashes, or I keep getting these headaches, or whatever it is. And they don't know what to do, or they think it's all in their head, or they've been told it's all in their head, or whatever it is. So I think it's really important for people to understand that, yes, the blood work is important. It can tell you some great information, but it doesn't have to it's not necessarily going to tell you everything. And even if it doesn't tell you anything, there's still other things you can do. There's still avenues you can walk down and things that can be checked. So I really appreciate that, that detailed
You're in a state of what
explanation.
I call pre-disease. You're pre-sick. You're on your way.
So I want to hear a little bit more about your wife today. Now that she's gone through all of this and you guys have navigated this, and she's changed her lifestyle and all of that, how is she feeling? What is she like today in comparison to before?
She's 100% better. There's no psoriasis. Her PMLE is gone. Like, she can be in the sun. We couldn't be in the sun even for 5 minutes. She could be in the
Right.
sun. Our entire life is back. And then she has, so like, once you are in this world, you will find the space of how loose you could be. So for example, let's just say you have psoriasis, and let's just say I actually have a patient whose psoriasis is really specific to how much avocado she eats. Okay, crazy story. But anyway, so she knows that she can have a little bit before the psoriasis acts up, right? So she can tell. So my wife can also tell her window, like, she could be a little looser, and then certain symptoms will come back, and then she'll pull it back, because autoimmunity is never cured. No one's curing your autoimmunity. You want to bring your flare up down to the point where it's non-existent. It feels cured, but it's always right there. So, so she knows, like, for on vacation, if there's a party, she can allow herself to be a little bit looser. But as soon as she starts feeling certain things, she knows she has to tighten it up, and it goes back down to zero. So she's in control of her disease.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So amazing.
So yeah, and that's what I want for my patients. I want you to be in control. So if you're like, hey, I don't care, it's Christmas and I just want to enjoy whatever, awesome. Just know you're not going to feel great the next day, but you are in control of that. And when you're ready, you pull it back. And that's great. And eyes wide open, and you're not going to plan a big meeting the next day. So you're in control. Yeah. So you're in control of your disease, and it doesn't like blindside you. Like, man, I had this big thing and like I'm a mess. My joints hurt. So there's no more blindside, and you're in control. And that's what we want for our patients.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, oh my gosh, this has been awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing all of the good information. I know whoever is watching this got some awesome nuggets, some great information, and I'm sure they are probably going to have some questions for you, or maybe want to find out more about your practice and how you work. So tell us tell everybody where they can find you.
Awesome. So it's called The New Method. The new is spelled with a K, because you always knew there was a better way. And I'm on every platform except for Twitter, because I talk too much. So The New Method on TikTok, The New Method, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We have a podcast. Anywhere you send us a message, my team is reading it. There's also the website. So wherever you go, it will always use the same link, same, we actually really read all our messages. Maybe not. I may not be the one reading it, but my team is reading it. Let us know what you need. And if you're not ready to jump in, consume the content. It's there for you. I especially on my podcast, I really go in depth into things. Take it, enjoy it. It's there for you.
Yes, totally agree. I follow Dr. E, and let me tell you, great content, so much. And it's, that very short, very palatable, very digestible information that you can take, and it's not all, wild and sciencey and all of that, where you can't
I
understand
give it the way I like to receive it.
Yes, exactly. And I appreciate that so much. So again, thank you so much, Dr. E, for your time. And
Pleasure.
for all of you out there who have watched this and enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of the combos. Until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.
Bye.